Hello and welcome back to another video. Today here again on Gran Turismo 7 to test out one of the more unusual new additions to the game, the Alpine A220 race car. So you all know the classic Alpine and, well, you may not know of, but there is a slightly more well-known racing car, the A210, and this is something that followed on from that. That actually there's not that much information about online. There's much more on its predecessor, the A210 racing car. But the stuff I did manage to find out about this in-game and out on the internet, it is quite an interesting story behind it. So let's take it for a drive and get into some more details about this rather interesting, quite different Alpine to what you're probably used to with the classic A110. So yes, it's the Alpine A220 racing car. Is a 1968 Alpine car developed for racing at Le Mans, following on from several successful Alpine races of the time, including the A210, which there was quite a lot more information about because that, well, raced for longer and was rather more successful than the A220 was, which was only a prototype racer for a couple of years. So it has a 3-litre V8 engine, which is actually made up of two 1.5-litre 4-cylinder Gordini engines, which produces a total of 319 horsepower from the combined two engines that effectively made up into a V8 for this racer. It weighs 690 kilos, so super light little car, and participated in, well, Le Mans in 68 and 1969, as well as potentially some other races, but that's kind of the era we're looking at here. And it wasn't actually terribly successful due to a number of issues faced by Alpine at the time, and basically it ended up being not powerful enough for the category it was in, which was a 3-litre category, and as it had more power than the predecessor the car was sort of based on, it did suffer from oversteer. It wasn't really built to cope with the amount of power this thing ended up with. It is tiny. Those kind of front lights look a bit disproportionate to the size of the car. It is a bit of an odd looking thing. But yeah, it wasn't terribly successful, and due to some of the troubles and things Alpine were having at the time, this ended up being the last sort of Alpine racer before the whole company was taken over by Renault. And yeah, that oversteer that I said it had because of that extra power was quite noticeable. You can see some dents in the car actually from previous laps. It's quite hard to keep this thing going in a straight line. Yeah, it's wobbling about everywhere. So it was quite fun to drive, but a bit scary. But yeah, once I got used to it, it wasn't too bad. But yeah, that oversteer was definitely there, and I can see why it was potentially not quite as good as it probably should have been. So, as with all previous cars I've tested out here on Gran Turismo 7, I took the Alpine for 5 laps around Deep Forest to see what the best time I could get out of it was. Now, as I said earlier when I sort of test drove it around Spa there, which is obviously where you test a Le Mans car, it did suffer from oversteer, so it was actually quite difficult getting a lap in at all. I can see what they mean about this being difficult to drive in reality. Yeah, it really was hard to keep traction. I guess that much power in a car that light, with 1960s tyres and brakes and things, kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's a tiny little thing that you could, well, you kind of imagine you'd be able to throw around, but yeah, had to be very careful, particularly getting on the power just to get a lap in. You might even be able to spot some of the dents from where it went off into the walls. The kind of weird thing about it was it wasn't when you initially accelerated. It kind of suddenly had a spike of power as if it was turbocharged, but it's a naturally aspirated engine, so I'm not quite sure why it was behaving like that. But yeah, you couldn't really try and turn in more than the car wanted to. If you sort of pushed it, the back would kick out, so you had to be quite gentle on steering inputs and obviously on accelerators and stuff. But yeah, it felt quick down the straights actually. Car that light with that much horsepower. I know it's not a powerful car, but it's only 600 kilos or so, so any kind of power is a lot in this. So yeah, it did struggle a bit, but I did finally manage to get this sort of okay-ish lap in without spinning. I kept spinning through this high-speed final corner on some of the previous laps. But yeah, I did end up getting a lap in as we go across the line. So I am slightly surprised to see that the time it's set, that 1:44.935, is, well, faster than a Radical, which I didn't think it would be. It kind of felt faster down the straights maybe than that, but I'm surprised given how well that Radical handled that it's faster. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised how far up the board it is. Obviously it's not going to be anywhere near a GT3 RS or an AMG GT Black Series, although 5 seconds isn't as much as I thought it might be. But yeah, I'm surprised how much faster it is than some of these, although having said that, I haven't checked exactly how they relate in terms of performance points here in Gran Turismo. So I quickly took the Alpine over to GT Auto and to the upgrade shop to get it up to 700 performance points. Rather unsurprisingly, there weren't any wide bodies or visual modification options, and well, I didn't want to take away the livery because, well, it should really have this on it. But I did end up just putting racing tyres on it, basically, because for whatever reason, stock, it's on comfort softs, maybe to represent 1960s tyre compounds, but it was amazing how much difference. It jumped it up 100 performance points, putting medium racing tyres on it went for in the end, because that put it at just over 700, and I dropped it down to 699 with a bit of adjustments in the car settings. But as you can see through there, it is still a bit unstable, but it is a huge improvement over standard, and it just goes to show what a major difference newer tyre technologies make, even in a game like this. It did make it quite a lot more enjoyable to drive. You weren't constantly worried about spinning. Having said that, I did spin it a few times on the first corner, and it still took a while to set a lap. And, well, as with the standard version, the 5th lap was actually my fastest, which usually cars that I'm more quickly familiar with, I set a fast time in lap 2 or 3 and generally don't improve after that. But yeah, this took all 5 laps to get a good lap in, basically. But yeah, it is amazing how much difference tyre compounds make. It does set quite a bit of faster time as we go across the line. So, if we take a look at the leaderboard, we see it's in 3rd place with a 132.759, and I think all of these pretty much are, if we look at the higher ones of these, from the Black Series here upwards, are all upgraded to the same 700. So, yeah, it's done pretty well. It's behind the Radical, but that was an incredible handling car, particularly with the upgrades. That was pretty amazing. And the Genesis, I kind of said, was a lot faster, mostly down to its all-wheel drive system. So yeah, it's done pretty well for a car from 1968 to beat an F8 Tributo and an AMG GT Black Series, although I probably am getting used to how to upgrade things here in Gran Turismo a little bit more, although that's not really true, is it? Because this only required tyres. That was the only downside of this car, was the tyres. There weren't actually many other options. But yeah, it's a cool car to have, and I'm pleased that I was able to afford it now that I've been able to do some circuit experience, because cars like this were rather difficult to get in Gran Turismo. So yes, overall rather impressed with the little Alpine A210 in the end. Yes, standard, it was a bit of a handful, well, a lot of a handful, but upgraded, it wasn't too bad. Well, upgraded with tyres that weren't comforts, so with some slightly newer tyres basically. It was quite nice to drive, a little bit oversteery still, but that's what you get with that much power through rear wheels of a car this light. But yeah, it's a cool thing to have, something a lot of people won't have heard of. Even the A210, I think it was the one that came before this, I hadn't really heard of before seeing this in Gran Turismo. But yeah, cool concept. Shame it wasn't really as successful as it should have been in reality. But good to see they're adding some of these, well, I was going to say iconic, but given not many people will have heard of it, cars to Gran Turismo is good. And now that we can afford some of the stuff from the antique car dealership with, well, money that's easier to get in Gran Turismo, it means hopefully I'll be able to drive some more cars like this. This one not actually being that expensive, but I have done a number of the circuit experience things, and it's earned me a few million already, so potentially we'll be looking at some more cars at some point soon. But for now, for a first look at the Alpine A210, I hope that is the right name for it, that is going to be all for today's video. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back with the next video very soon.